Part 2 starts now.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The Grand Failure Beyond the Streets.
Welcome back to the Grand Failure Beyond the Streets podcast, where we dive deep into the issues affecting our community and hold our public officials accountable. I'm your host, Rebekah Massie. Today, we're going to continue our exploration into a troubling pattern of behavior from Councilwoman Cline. If you are listening for the first time, this is a two-part episode about all of this bad press Cline has created for our city with her actions and how she's chosen to conduct herself while running a campaign to become the next mayor of Surprise. I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to part 1 of the episode if you have not already done so. And it's probably better too if you've also listened to episode 4, Signgate 2024. But anywho, before we dive into the second part of You Took an Oath, let me quickly recap where we left off in this saga. So episode 4 of this podcast is entitled, once again, Signgate 2024, and that goes over the events of what happened on March the 27th, where Cline was caught tearing down signs advertising the Grand Failure, which is my website, thegrandfailure.org, and that advocates for solutions to the traffic issues in Northwestern Surprise. And along with that sign was another sign that advertised an opportunity for registered voters in Surprise to sign a nomination petition for Mr. Kevin Sartor, who's running now for mayor. And at the time, he was working to get on the ballot and was also, at that time, Cline's only potential opposition on the ballot for our next mayor. I also went over last episode the allegations that are based on the actions that Cline took at both city events and events within her own district, namely her own District 2 community meetings, where she was collecting signatures for her nomination petitions and or campaigning at a city-sanctioned event. I'll dive today more in depth into the legal impacts, explain the findings from the city-hired outside legal counsel of Pierce Coleman P. LLC, what they were able to substantiate, findings based on my own research and my own legal consulting that I've done, and then really where we go from here as a city. So this is going to be my one and only warning, so to speak, if we want to call it that. Just to say that if you have not listened to Signgate 2024, which is episode 4, or you took an oath, part 1, which is episode 5, that this will likely make far more sense to you if you pause here now and you go back and listen to those 2 episodes before continuing on. Okay, so if you're still sticking around with me, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and jump right in where we left off. And that is going to be the legal analysis by the outside counsel. Once again, that's the legal firm Pierce Coleman P. LLC. Here goes nothing. And again, if you didn't listen to me and go back and listen to the other 2 episodes, don't say I didn't warn you. All right, so first and foremost, let me walk you through the findings of the elephant in the room. And by that, I mean, before I get into the outside counsel, let me walk you through what happened at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, which is who had the decision based on the police report that I filed against Cline regarding the tearing down of those 2 signs that I mentioned earlier. Now, I mentioned this on the last episode, or part 1, rather. I don't want to get into the weeds too much on this one because I do feel that it was mishandled a bit, but what I will say is that the wording and the verbiage that's used on the turn down letter, which is what they call a decision to not move forward with pressing charges. So this turn down letter that I received, the verbiage on here is very telling, especially if you've studied law in any capacity or taken any law classes or legal classes, or even just have researched yourself and understand how the legal system works. To explain further, the turn down letter that I received does not say that Councilwoman Cline was innocent, nor does it say that there was no crime committed. So once again, doesn't say she's innocent, doesn't say there was no crime. What it does say is that the county attorney's office did not feel that if the case made it or was sent to trial, that it would result in a conviction. This is important. I'll explain later when I go over my research and my own analysis. But without further ado, let's go ahead and go over what the outside counsel weighed in on as far as the violations to and potential violations of laws, any violations of city policies and procedures, and so forth. I'm not going to read the entire 21-page report word for word, but here is a synopsis for you. So, for Cline's actions during her district meetings, they found her in violation of state law under the Arizona Revised Statutes. Specifically, this was ARS Title 9-500.14. So again, ARS 9-500.14. Now, this particular statute essentially says that a city or town cannot spend or use resources to influence the outcome of an election. The determination that said this was a violation came from what the legal counsel said was unambiguous nature of her vote for Ally comment. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's no mincing words there. She intended to tell people to vote for her. Okay. Pierce Coleman also found that these actions are in violation of city policies, particularly rules 1, 2, and 3. Now, rule number 1 indicates that a violation of acting in her own private interest versus the interest of the city, right? You're in government to serve the people, not serve yourself. Rule number 2 indicates a failure to abide by state law when she used public resources to influence the outcome of an election. Because this was a city advertised event, a city sponsored event, there were city officials there, and she was there in her normal council working hours. That's the public resources, okay? And rule number 3 is conducting herself in an unprofessional manner, i.e., you know it's wrong, you knew you crossed the line, you continue to do it anyway. It's not a good look, right? So the outside legal firm also found that Cline's actions of asking commission members to sign her own nomination petition was also a violation, once again, of city policy under Rule 1, acting in her own interest, and Rule 3, behaving unprofessionally as she was seeking support within City Hall. They also go on to explain that this is very likely a violation of state law. Again, they cite ARS 9-500.14, and they also bring up a different state statute, which is ARS Title 38, 504, Item C. Now, in the Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 38, 504, Item C states that a public officer or employee shall not use or attempt to use their official position to secure anything of value or a valuable benefit to them that they would not otherwise have were it not for their position. I am paraphrasing a bit here, but like usual, not only will I link the report, but I will go ahead and link the applicable policies and laws. So far we have violations at both of her district meetings. All right, so just to recap before I go into the other allegations, right? If we look at her district meetings and her actions after the commission meetings, those were deemed to be in violation of state laws and city policies. Now, typically in a legal matter, you would add these up by counts. Now, since there was one violation at the commission meeting held in October, one violation or one action that constituted a violation of these things in the commission meeting in November, the March 15th district meeting was one violation, and there were 2 separate instances on the April district meeting that she spoke out of turn and behaved in a manner that she was not supposed to. There was the one where she's doing the vote for Ally stuff like she did in March. And then there's the actions where she goes on to paint her opponent in a not so great light and influence the vote that way. Now, moving forward through the other allegations that we discussed. So for the mayoral debate and the softball game both, the outside counsel does not find this to be in violation of any policies or laws. Now, I personally do not agree with these sentiments, and I'll explain a little bit more later here in a few moments. But this is what Pierce Coleman states on their report, so I'm simply informing you all of their findings in an effort to be transparent. I don't want there to be any sort of misconceptions out there. But here's what they found. They did not find it to be in violation. Their argument was that it's not a uniform, quote unquote, and that once the polo shirt is in her possession, that it becomes her property, which is true. And again, I'll explain why I disagree with that a little bit later. But let's move into the last item that the outside counsel did take a brief review or brief look into that I have yet to mention, and that is the sign removal. And there's a reason why I haven't mentioned that, because what Pierce Coleman elected to do was to not make a determination. It was pending legal review by the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. They didn't want to get involved with something already being reviewed. Now, we know that shortly after this report came through, the county handed down their determination. But what they did state in their review of what happened is that, number one, there is no factual dispute that Cline removed the signs. So she did it. There's no, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit type of a situation.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
She did it. Okay. They do go on to explain that this, regardless whether any state laws were violated, it could be construed as a city municipal code violation under the SMC, which is better known as the Surprise Municipal Code. So SMC section 109-1.17. So 109-1.17, that particular item regulates the removal of signs. They explain that based on that statute or based on that line item in our city code, Cline had no legal authority to remove the signs, neither as a council member nor a private citizen. Pierce Coleman does go in and weigh a little bit further in relation to the Surprise City policies and states that based on this, regardless of the legality of everything, she was unequivocally in violation of rules 1, 2, 3, and 7. Since I've already explained rules 1 through 3, we'll go through with what rule 7 is. And what that is, rule 7 specifically states that city officials cannot interfere with the administrative functions of the city or the city government. All right. Now that I've wrapped up the analysis provided by the outside counsel, let's move into my own analysis. I'm going to give you guys my quick disclaimer. I've said it before, but I am not a lawyer. I don't play one on television. I don't consider myself an expert. I do consider myself, however, to be a good student. And by good student, I mean that I am able to study materials, in this case, the city policies, the city laws or codes, and the state laws, and then take that information to leverage making informed decisions, formulate logical opinions, trains of thought, and then analyze the information in front of me or that is presented to me. So here is what I believe based on the findings. Number one, I wholeheartedly agree with the assessment of Pierce Coleman PLLC on the findings and the interpretations of the law, as well as their interpretations of city policies when it comes to the actions and the conduct of Councilwoman Cline at her district meetings. I believe that her actions are 100% reprehensible, and I believe that the censure that her fellow council members handed down after this material was presented to them on June the 18th to have been the correct first step. Again, first step. I do, however, feel strongly that there are other avenues of punishment or reprimanding for her that are in order. There are line items in our state statutes, specifically under ARS 16-192, and that states that if there is a violation in using public resources to influence an election, civil penalties can be ordered. Again, I'll link that in the podcast information section on my website. But for those who don't speak legalese, civil penalties means fines. Now, the amount of fines and who those fines go to depends on who's filing the complaint and so forth. Again, that's why I'm linking the statute. The other statutes that are at play here are first and foremost violations of Title 38, number 503. And that is the conflict of interest statute that's mentioned by the outside legal counsel's analysis. If you move down just a few more line items in the statutes under ARS Title 38, 510, 510 states that any person who knowingly or intentionally violates statutes 38503 through 38505 is guilty of a Class 6 felony. I think that's important because that plays hand in hand into the sign issue, right? More on that in a moment. But the second item that I want to provide an analysis on is the city-issued polo. Now, I disagree with the position presented on the city-issued polo. To be clear, this is not a hill I am in any way prepared to die on or anything. However, my point about these polos are, based on what one city council member told me, these polos are not able to be purchased by the public, okay? So they're only available for city officials, city employees, things like that. And so where my analysis differs, and the outside counsel even mentioned this, so I was kind of surprised that they didn't draw any parallels here, but there's legal precedent to not allow, say, a police officer or a firefighter to campaign while wearing their uniforms. Now, I would say that based on my analysis, that same philosophy and that same precedent should be applied to any other government-issued clothing or uniform, especially when you consider that the polo that she's wearing was embroidered not just with the City of Surprise logo, but I believe it also has her name and her current elected position of council member District 2. So in my mind, just like you would look at a police officer's uniform and see a badge with a badge number, right, and a name, or you would look at a firefighter, right, see their name, see their rank, right, you would also look at, say, a member of the military, and you would see their name, you would see their rank, etc. There's not really, I'm not saying that there's no difference between those roles and an elected city official role, but where do you draw the line as to what constitutes an official article of clothing? I would say that having the city logo on there and then having her name and her elected position is not, as far as articles of clothing go, it's not unlike having other insignia that designates your badge, your rank, or what have you, right? But again, I'm not prepared to die on that hill. So let's move into the final item that is left, which is the sign removal piece. Since I'm still reviewing what other actions or avenues that I can pursue this with, see what's out there, including discussing the charging decision with the county attorney's office, I don't want to reveal my full hand too much here, but I do adamantly disagree with the county's decision. I understand fully why the outside legal counsel did not weigh in, as a decision was still pending at the time the firm concluded their report. I do, however, find the assessment that was given by Pierce Coleman very interesting. So if you notice, they don't weigh in on whether the signs are considered to be campaign signs under Arizona law. And honestly, I'm not 100% certain myself, although I do believe that the way that campaign signs and political signs are described under state law, specifically under ARS 16-1019, that there's a very good chance that the signs in question, at the very least for the nomination petition of Mr. Sartor, are considered political and or campaign signs. What I also know is that the way that the police report was filed, based on the way that the charging determination was handed down, it looks like the way that the report was filed was only for theft and criminal damage. And this is further supported by my call down to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office 1 week before they made the decision not to charge her. So a week before they made the decision to not charge her, I called down, I spoke to victim services at the county. So what they did let me know is that a decision had not yet been made. However, there were 2 separate felony counts that the decision was being weighed upon. Those 2 felony counts were for 1, theft, intent to deprive, because she wouldn't give me the signs back when I asked for them, and criminal damage, because she tore the sign almost in half when she removed them from the pole that they were posted on. Now, because there is the political speech element here, the conflict of interest element, and the attempts to influence the election, coupled with the violations of city policy, I think that there is a good chance the county could change their decision, or perhaps a different legal avenue may pan out that I am able to pursue. Again, I'm in contact with the prosecutor that's been assigned to my case here, and they have been sent a copy of the outside counsel's investigative findings. Time's going to have to tell on this one, but as I said, I do not agree with zero legal consequences on the sign removal. So to be clear, this is not to be petty. This is not because I have an axe to grind. This is not because there's a witch hunt going on. Despite what some Cline supporters may have you believing on social media, this is literally because what she has done with not only the sign removal, but especially when you couple this with all of her other actions, is truthfully an attack on the election process. And we as a community and as a society should not stand for that at all. That should be protected at all costs. The next segment of this episode, or really at this point, I should just call it a saga, I suppose. But I can tell you right now that there is community outrage. And the community outrage is not one-sided. There's outrage on both sides. Without implicating myself with any bias, let me go ahead and share with you what I've experienced through all of this. So let's get into the responses that I've seen throughout the community. The first response is those who are just as upset, if not more, than I am, with the gross overreaching actions that Councilwoman Cline has taken. Many people have reached out to me both publicly and privately, expressing not only their appreciation for my work and my efforts to expose all of this, because let's face it, I'm sticking my neck out there. It's kind of a little crazy that even the Arizona Republic article got picked up by not one, but two different national news sites, MSN and USA Today. So I've really stuck my neck out for this, right? In fact, even more interesting facts were discovered about Allie Cline throughout all of this while we were waiting for the outside counsel and so forth. And specifically, the other actions were related to her involvement with our state legislative district number 29. Now, apparently, somebody in LD 29 was able to find or had shared with them right before Allie ran for public office. She changed her voter registration status to Republican. Now, I don't know conclusively what it was before. After I give you this next little couple tidbits of information, I'll let you go ahead and draw your own conclusions here in just a moment. So not only did she go and she joined the Republican Party, but she also took on the responsibility of becoming a precinct committeeman. If you don't know what that is, it's a very small but technically elected or sometimes nominated office where your responsibility is to serve within your legislative district, and more specifically, your precinct, which is similar to a neighborhood or group of neighborhoods. It'll kind of depend based on population a little bit. And what you're meant to do is push the party agenda, the party ideals, the party values, party candidates, especially after the primaries take place. And then you're also tasked with working to expand the registered voter pool in your neighborhood, specifically registered voters for your party. Where this becomes important is that when you are a precinct committeeman, there are specific rules and bylaws that must be followed while you are serving. In Cline's case, this became a factor when it was brought to light that during her time as a PC, or precinct committeeman, she was donating to multiple Democratic candidates. And these candidates were not only in the state of Arizona, but other locations as well. There were also donations to PACs with Democratic Party ties and or social agendas. And one PAC that she donated to was even named Stop Republicans. All of this was done through an organization called Act Blue, which is basically tasked with pushing the Democratic Party agenda and you can have the contributions earmarked for specific things. So if you go on the FEC's website, search for her, you would be able to see that it's a donation to Act Blue. And if you click on the additional details or the little arrow next to it, it'll tell you what it's earmarked for. So needless to say, all of these donations were found in violation of the bylaws that Cline had voluntarily agreed to and agreed to uphold as a PC. And as of June 20th, there was a precinct committee meeting. She has had her voting rights stripped within the LD. The chairman of the LD 29 Republican stated that during this meeting, he did not feel that it was necessary to push for a censure on Cline since she was not running for re-election as a PC. And later in the meeting, they did actually go on to vote on an endorsement for a different mayoral candidate who does now hold the endorsement of the LD 29 Republicans. As for the other reactions and responses, let's just say that there are several groups who are very unhappy with my part in all of this, which, if you ask me, it's really just a shooting the messenger type situation here, but I digress, I suppose. I've been censored on social media platforms, primarily Nextdoor, and this has been done where people have basically been reporting posts for things like false information, non-local politics in the main feed, which is against the terms of service for Nextdoor, things like discrimination and other accusations that just don't make sense. None of these are true. Everything that I have posted has been backed with facts and evidence. I mean, we're talking like I've posted things like news articles. I posted a link to the public document that I uploaded to Google Drive of the outside counsel's report on her actions. Or I've posted links to the videos of her doing what I alleged she was doing on video. So it's irrefutable evidence. It's a shame that through all of this, the moderators on Nextdoor, or at least certain moderators on Nextdoor, are choosing to vote with bias versus being impartial in the moderation role that they've taken on. It's a thankless job a lot of the times, and it's very difficult to remove your own biases, but it's not okay. And there's even been people who have taken it a step further who have outright approached me in person, and they've tried to incite some sort of reaction out of me, like including a couple of times where I thought people were physically ready to start something. And it wasn't just my perception either. There were people who were like, oh my God, I thought that they were going to shank you in the parking lot or something. You know, obviously that's an extreme reaction and a little bit of a hyperbolic example, but other people picked up on it too. Something to know about me, I'm sure this is going to come as a shocker, right? I match energies. So if you're respectful to me, I will be respectful to you. I will, even if we disagree, we can agree to disagree. I can have a level-headed conversation. However, if you pop off at me or try to troll me or make some sort of falsely based argument simply to try and elicit a reaction out of me, I'm going to respond in kind. And that goes for in person or on social media. And believe it or not, there's been some people who have gone out of their way to seek out my posts specifically just to be a pain in my ass. And that's honestly hysterical to me because for those of you who don't know anything about social media is all based on algorithms. And not only does reacting, but also commenting and so forth, it boosts my posts in the feed, not just for you, but for your friends where their algorithm has marked them as having similar interests to you. So not only does this make my post more visible to you and to your friends, but it also tells Facebook, for example, the more that you react to my content, the more of it you are going to see. And there's, of course, settings that you can do, like stop seeing this or block or whatever, right? If you don't like it, or you can just keep scrolling and mind your business. That's free too. But you're literally tailoring your algorithm to show more of me. If you don't like it, just stop it. You don't have to like what I put out there, but what I put out there is truth, sometimes my opinion on things, etc. What's even more bonkers through all of this is I've received a couple of emails from people asking me things like, stop spreading lies, when literally everything that I've put out there is backed by facts, evidence, video, photo, whatever, right? And funnily enough, I actually got an email from somebody who forwarded me word for word the county attorney's decision where it talks about there were 2 possible felony counts. We elected to not move forward with charging. And they told me to stop spreading lies. And this was because a conversation that I had with them a week earlier about Cline being under review for felonies. And this person chose to go out of their way to email me and be like, stop spreading lies. I wanted to be like, did you even read what you sent me? Because it literally substantiates what I told you a week ago. But whatever. Regardless of all of this, something everybody needs to understand and take a second to ponder is everything that I put out there is going to be linked to a source, shared with a video, shared with an article, or if it is something that's my opinion, I will, like when I've weighed in on laws that she's potentially violated, right? I've linked the statutes or put them out there in plain text for you to look at, and then coupled with the video shortly thereafter or right before. Okay, all of this is based on my research. If somebody thinks that they're going to be able to take me to court for libel or slander or defamation of character, they're sorely mistaken, because there's a lot that you have to prove, and all of the burden of proof is on the accuser for something like that. But again, shooting the messenger, I'm just exposing. You can be mad about it, but your anger is not at me. So I guess to summarize everything here is that whichever side of the fence that you sit on, I've certainly seen an overwhelming amount of emotionally charged reactions to Cline's actions and to my willingness to shed some light on this situation or these situations. It's probably also safe to say that nearly all of the reactions are angry. It's just dependent on who you ask and their lens of how they're viewing things as to who exactly they're angry at. Now, let's look into the fallout of these issues. I want to try and make this quick for the sake of time here, but really, this has brought to light some fundamental issues within our city's elected officials. You have some folks thinking that they are above the law. You have the law, at least for right now, not pressing charges against somebody who is objectively wrong and likely violated multiple laws with their actions and also city policies. You have people outraged, and once again, some of them even outraged at the wrong person, i.e. the messenger. See also me. And you have an election that takes place at the end of July, meaning next month. And it feels like the integrity issue of a candidate and how they're campaigning is not really being addressed outside of a public condemnation of her actions. For those of you who don't know, that's what a censure is. It's basically a formal slap on the wrist of you did a bad thing. We don't approve of it. And just having city council say that they disapprove isn't enough, nor should we accept that as the end all be all to these issues at hand. What we should be doing is demanding more action. We should be demanding that the integrity of our election is upheld, and we should be advocating for government officials to wake up a bit here and say enough is enough. But we'll get into that on the what's next here as I move forward to discuss really where we as a city can go from here and wrap up part 2 of You Took an Oath. So you may be asking, as we look into the future, what can we do? Honestly, the biggest thing that we as a community can do is make sure that our voices are heard. And I'm not just talking about going to meetings and speaking. There's something even easier that's more introvert friendly. Okay. The easiest way to do that is by voting. That's it. Now, this is critical because the deadline to register for the July 30th primary election is July 1st. If you still need to register or you need to change your registration status, you can go to beballottready.vote. That's BEBALLOTREADY.vote. Beballottready.vote. make sure that you're registered. Once you're registered, you're going to go to the polls and cast your ballots. This is important because unless there is not a mayoral candidate who receives 50% or more of the votes, this election is going to be the last as far as city officials are concerned. Now, there are also council seats up for grabs. Unfortunately, those races are uncontested. But if you are in District 2, District 3, or District 4, I strongly encourage you to look up the candidates who are running and make sure that you want to actually cast your yes vote for them. You don't have to bubble them in just because they're the only ones running, after all. Pivoting back to the mayoral race, the 50% requirement for the majority is honestly a little bit more in question at this point. And that's simply because we now have a total of 3 candidates running. 2 are physically printed on the ballot, and those are Kevin Sartor and Cline. The third candidate is a write-in. His name is Ed Cunningham. I'll be sure to post links to their websites on the info for the podcast episode, of course, so that you all can research for yourselves, make an educated decision on who you think is best for the mayor of Surprise. I'll also link the 2 candidate forums that Cline and Sartor participated in together. And then after the second forum, there was an interview that was conducted by Epic Networking Series, which is who helped the Surprise Independent host the second candidate forum. And they interviewed the writing candidate after the fact. Despite what you may be seeing on social media, the forum by Independent and Epic was set in motion a couple of months before it was scheduled. There was even a debate briefly as far as where it would be held when it comes to the location. And all of this took place before the third candidate went in and filed their paperwork and their statement of interest to be able to run. I'm also working myself to try and get all candidates who are running for office to participate in a brief interview and have sort of a mini series of episodes on my podcast here. So keep your eyes on social media for updates on that. What I will share so far is that I have written emails to all candidates. Yes, even Cline. I think it's important if you're conducting an interview to try and remain impartial, try to remain fair, especially if you may already have publicly declared or shown support for one candidate in particular. In these emails to the candidates, I've been more than transparent. I've sent over the questions that I intend to ask them. They're the same for each of the candidates. The only exception to that is if they're running opposed, there's a question of, hey, how do you differentiate yourself from the other candidates, something along those lines. Or if you're seeking re-election, why are you seeking re-election? Or if this is your first time running, what inspired you? Type of things. All of those are provided in a very transparent sort of if this, then that format and methodology so that all of the candidates can see what all of the possible questions are that I'm going to ask them. And honestly, if the candidates choose on their own accord to compare notes, they can also see that person A got the same questions as person B. Now, the candidates that I have been in contact with and that initially have provided positive responses are as follows. You have Councilman Patrick Duffy, who's currently serving in District 3, and he is seeking re-election. You have Mr. Johnny Milton, who is currently seeking election into District 4's council seat to replace Ken Renly. I've reached out and gotten a response from Ed Cunningham and his campaign manager, who's running once again for the write-in for the mayor's office. I've spoken to Kevin and regularly speak to Kevin, who is on the ballot for the role of mayor. The 2 that I haven't really heard much from are Cline, and it's been a few months since I've heard from her. The last communication I got from her was before the whole sign issue, and her response was that she was, quote, very busy with spring training, which kind of confused me, but whatever. I followed up, didn't hear back. I've also reached out to Mr. Earl Greenberg, and Earl is running for Allie's seat that she is vacating at the end of the year because she's intending to, or she is rather, running for mayor and no longer going to be our councilwoman one way or another at the end of the year. Now, Earl did initially respond And his initial response was that he wanted to finish reading the 2040 General Plan, which, by the way, is also on the ballot for us in July. Another reason why you should register. Again, I followed up with both Councilwoman Cline and Mr. Greenberg. I will do so again before I call it quits, as it were. Only time's going to tell if they select to participate in the interview. No matter what, I'll keep you all informed either way. But anywho, that's a wrap on this 2-part episode entitled You Took an Oath. This is your host, Rebekah Massie, signing off. Until next time, surprise.
You're listening to The Grand Failure Beyond the Streets, a podcast about the ongoing public safety crisis in Surprise, Arizona.
The Grand Failure podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by Rebekah Massie. Jonathan Perry is credited with the voiceover and announcement work. I'd like to thank Spotify for Podcasters as the hosting and distribution platform, and the folks over at Audacity with the open source software that made the production and editing of this podcast possible. Any graphics, logos, or artwork used to promote or identify the podcast was created by Rebekah Massie using the Canvas software. Sound effects and music provided courtesy of freesound.org, a website that offers royalty-free Community Commons licenses for a variety of soundbites, songs, and effects. I'd like to take a quick moment to give a shout out to local reporters Jason Stone with the Surprise Independent and Sean Raimundo with the Arizona Republic for writing and publishing news articles on this ongoing situation within the Surprise community. Any sources, news articles, or other information will be listed and linked on the webpage dedicated to the Grand Failure podcast on thegrandfailure.org. That's thegrandfailure.org. I'd also like to thank a local political action committee in the area, or PAC, by the name of Voice of Surprise, for their partnership in my efforts on this podcast, as well as give a quick shout out and thank you to my husband, Brian Massie, who has graciously put up with all my work on this endeavor. Thank you so much for your time, and all of the podcast credits, details, and information can once again be found on the website, thegrandfailure.org.